If I told you, Camille, I'm like going to go back to school and get a PhD, you would be so like high-fiving me. And for me, therapy is education for my brain and my heart and my relationships. And that should
Ooh, I
never
love
be
that.
embarrassing.
So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. Welcome back, everyone, to Call Me CEO. This is your host, Camille Walker. And if this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a repeat listener, thank you so very much. We talk about women building businesses here, balancing family, finding the best solution for you. It's all about that perfect harmony. Each of us is different. And today's guest is an expert in that, and also finding stewardship in the role that you play in home, in business, in relationships. And her name is Ganel-Lyn Condie. She is a professional speaker, media host, and author. And when I met her, she came highly recommended. They're like, you've got to come meet her. And so grateful that we have been able to connect. I can't wait to talk about all of these amazing topics today. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so grateful to, I just say, I think from COVID, we just got better at technology. And so now we get to have way more conversations. And COVID was really hard. But sometimes I feel like certain conversations are happening now only because we've learned how to pivot and use Zoom much better. So it's cool to be connected with you today.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting how devastation can bring revelation and inspiration for new ways of doing things. And you
Yes.
see that, through all the hundreds and hundreds of years of time. So I am grateful for that. Thank you for bringing that
Yeah.
perspective. And I would love for everyone to get a better feel for who you are, what your mission is, your purpose. Tell us about what you do and who you are.
Well, I think first and foremost, especially for your audience, I'm a mom of two adult children. So I'm a new empty nester as of a few months ago, which is a weird new transition. My husband and I have been married 32 years and we're alphabet dating. So if anyone follows me on social media, we're on, at the time of this taping, K. We just finished the K date. And so we're trying to like transition into a new season of life. But I have 17, I think at this point, published books, and I've hosted 4 different weekly shows. Locally, I've been doing Good Things Utah. For our Utah audience, they'll be familiar with that television show. I've done that for about 7 years on a monthly basis. And I'm often on KSL Radio, KSL TV, and The Lisa Show on BYU Radio. And I really love when I get to speak on platforms like this, because what I've come to know is that we're in someone's earbud while they're like journeying through life or trying to do the laundry or pay the bills or build the business. And I'm 52 and I've dealt with chronic illness and the death of my 40-year-old sister 9 years ago to suicide. And so for me, mental health is kind of always the thing I squeeze in. So whether it's in a book or speaking on a stage or interviewing on a podcast or guesting on TV, radio, I try to incorporate mental health, because for me, mental health is health. And so that's everyone on the planet that needs to have the conversation. And so her story, she's still my partner. I've shared her story thousands and thousands of times all over the world. And I feel like she's my partner in having a different conversation. And I would say 9 years later, there are more voices having that conversation. And that gives me some hope. I feel like the needle is moving in some really powerful ways within the mental health community and in our everyday lives. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm pretty open book, and I try to be real and authentic, and that it takes courage and it costs you to be that way. But I've just decided that there doesn't need to be any more voices out there if we're not having real conversations. And so I'm excited to see where our conversation goes today.
Yeah. Oh, me too. You know, as we're filming this, this is actually September 12th, which National Suicide Awareness Day was just 2 days ago.
Right?
And they say that there's a suicide
Yeah.
every 40 seconds. So I shared
Yes.
that NFL ad.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I just connected with Caitlin and I just was at an event with her and she's kind of the machine and engine behind that new NFL. It's QB United and it's a really cool message that all of these big football players are having this
Mhm.
conversation. And that's really important, not to cut you off, but men are the number one group dying by suicide, middle-aged men. And that sometimes shocks people when I share that statistic because they think teens or LGBTQ and though or veterans and those demographics do have high numbers, but just based on number, men are the number one group dying by suicide. And so I think it's powerful when football players are joining the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember as a kid hearing about, I had a couple of classmates through whispered, you know, in the hall that they had lost their dads to suicide, but that's all it was. It wasn't, we never dug into why would someone do that? What are the implications of that? What is the mental health, you know, crisis that's going on behind that? So to see that these men are now speaking for other men and bringing awareness to the issue and that it's so much more, we're so much more connected by it than we even realize. And so I think that giving power and voice to that is so impactful.
Well, I mean, one of the things I like to share when we're having conversations around mental health is that everyone either struggles themselves or loves someone that struggles.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say struggle, I mean like chronic, high risk mental health struggle. I think all of us deal with mental health every day. We should be checking in with ourselves every day. Where's my mental health at? And what does support look like today? That's all of us. It's just as integral into your health and well-being as your physical health and your exercise program and all the things we tweet and post and Instagram about and all the reels about how to do this exercise move and eat this food. To me, it all goes back to what is our brain and our heart feeling about life that day. And so when we think of mental health in that way, that it's health and that all of us either struggle at a high level or love someone that does, that's everyone on the planet. There's not like a different demographic that needs to be having mental health conversations. You know, last night I went to a yoga class with my husband and he doesn't do yoga. And I shattered my wrist in 52 places in January. I have like a metal plate and 9 screws in my wrist right now. So it was the first time like that I've done yoga in a long, long time. And it was this beautiful, like supportive, it was an evening class. It was not super high pose impact. And I was just like in this zone of gratitude and you know how people feel after they do something that really nurtures their body and their soul. By the time we got home last night, I was in a full-blown anxiety attack about some big changes in my life professionally this last few months. And the voice in my head, the story in my head was not great. And so I did some journaling last night, but I shut down. I know I kind of closed off. And I just share that as a little glimpse into, I think people that know me from books or social media or speaking or media think somehow that I have this conversation and that it's happening and I'm speaking at it as a observer. I am experiencing it and I have to address my mental health every single day. And I have a really big toolbox. I put a lot of tools in there and some days the tools that I've used that have worked really well aren't working. So conversations like this and podcasts like this to me are really helpful in that hopefully what we share with each other spurs an idea for a listener that may be feeling like they don't know what tool to use or they've used all the tools that used to work and they're not working anymore. I mean, I talk to a lot of women and men that kind of think of therapy as just this one thing. It's traditional talk therapy. And I like to talk about therapy as education. I have a teaching degree and a minor in psychology. And I would just say therapy for me is a much broader term than it was even 5 years ago. There's EMDR, there's DBT, there's light therapy I use during the winter. You know, I get massage on a regular weekly basis because of my physical health and my mental health. And so let's expand the idea of what therapy looks like and what tools are and what support looks like and realize that therapy, whatever therapy you're using, is education. And no one is embarrassed about more education. Like if I told you, Camille, I'm like going to go back to school and get a PhD, you would be so like high-fiving me. And for me, therapy is education for my brain and my heart and my relationships. And that should never be embarrassing.
Oh, I love that so much. I love that. I love that because it really is, as we go into therapy in any medium that it is, it's teaching us a broader perspective or a new way of looking at things or how to deconstruct something and build from there. So tell me, I'm really curious just to pivot back a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you get into this space of having such a wide media presence? Because I have a lot of women who I talk to who are passionate about a certain genre or topic or business, and they want to become a public speaker or they want to become radio or media, anything. What was it about your career path in that regard that led you to being a voice piece in so many different areas?
So I'm really grateful that we're recording this because I get this question on social media. I get DMs for this question almost on the daily. And now I'm just going to send them the link for this.
There we go.
I'm going to just say, I answer it here. And so let me try to be very specific and very general. And the reason I say that is because in the influencer world, which I don't necessarily love that term, I kind of feel like I'm still a teacher. And so the classroom I'm using is Instagram, writing a book, or doing an interview, right? It's, to me, I'm still about education. I am not the biggest educator in the world of influencers, like numbers wise. I can get frustrated on the algorithms and the outcomes and the numbers.
Oh, girl, I know.
So I want to say that out loud because I know there's someone in your audience. There's been so many times, especially the last 3 months, that I've almost kind of shut all my accounts down and kind of decided maybe God, for me, it's God. It's always kind of, that's whatever your religious identifying term might be. For me, it's, I call God, God. And I've kind of said to God, like, maybe you don't need my voice in this way. So first and foremost, I would just be really clear that because we have these social media tools, you are no longer dependent on someone else giving you permission with a green light. You can start a YouTube channel, an Instagram account, a Facebook group, literally right now. When I started in this world, I've been a magazine editor. Facebook was just starting. Like literally, we were trying to create in print form what Instagram is now, what Facebook groups are now. We were trying to create community and connection for women along the Wasatch Front. And we were trying to spotlight diversity in print form because there was not a way to like meet up. And so first and foremost, I would say if there's something on your heart, that give God credit that he may be calling that to you, start. No one has to give you permission. You don't have to join a writer's group because Amazon now allows you to self-publish, right? If you want to join a writer's group so that you have some feedback and support, great. But that's the first thing I would say is start taking steps forward. God can use movement. And sometimes we want to sit in our office and come up with the plan. And I will say after all these years, I have just tried to act on the impressions, the feelings and the thoughts that have come to me. Now, I say that and I will be very like pragmatic and say the speaking career started because someone asked me to speak. And at the time I was doing an organizational consulting business. And then I spoke and that group, people went to work and said, hey, we just heard the speaker. And it kind of snowballed in that way. Sometimes I feel like my career is so diverse that that's a gift, you know? And sometimes, especially when it comes to algorithms, it's a curse in that my Instagram account is not a photography account. It's not a DIY account. It's not a food blog. It's not a mommy blogger, right? I create faith content, mental health content. I'm a writer. I'm a speaker. I do media. I have lupus. I lost a sister to suicide. I'm an empty nester. And that's harder because I can't just say I'm just this area that I can specialize in. And a lot of experts out in the field will tell you, find that one thing and hone it into that. And so I would say to your audience, it's asking that questions, it's relationship based. And so my TV connections are based on relationship. I go on Good Things Utah every month. They've never once told me what topic. So I'm going to send, after we're done talking, I'm sending my email with my topic for next month. And I've been sitting with it and I try to really just share what's really happening in my life. What are middle-aged women that are trying to balance their health, their families, and their work career in a world that is very crowded and very loud? There are a lot of voices out there. There are a lot of whatever we would call influencers or successful people shaping conversations. But I would say anyone that's listening to this, there's no one that has your voice.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one. I mean, I get compared to people all the time. Oh, you're kind of the whatever person Brene Brown like, or you're this kind of person if they know me from a faith community, right? Or you're right. And and all I'm trying to do is be me. And if I'm not adding to the conversation in a unique way or trying to solve a problem, then I don't need to show up just to talk. Mm-hmm. And so when I give counsel or answer a DM on this, I would say, look at everything before you as a stewardship. And that is a book I released last year called The Stewardship Principle. It really has changed how I frame everything. If someone has invited you or you're having the feeling like, I want to talk about my child who's dealing with spectrum behavior, or I want to talk about starting a floral design business, or, I don't know, whatever that thing is, it's obvious you're going to run into people that are doing it already. Mm-hmm. And yet where I think we get trapped in is that one, we go into comparisons in our stewardships and we say, well, so-and-so is already bigger. They're already doing it. Right. Or we get into this other new trap. I think this is a new modern day problem. And this is my new modern day problem. I think we are all trying to be so unique that we're stagnating in our creation and our offering because we haven't come up with the most unique viral video or reels or Etsy store or website design. So I think we get trapped on either ends of those bookends, right? One bookend is you have to be like fill in the blank, Brene Brown, whatever, or Oprah, right? And if you're not that, then you're not successful. Well, before Instagram, if I had done any content that reached 2,000 people, I would have been so happy. Mm-hmm. But now that Instagram's out there, if a Reels only gets 2,000, that's not good enough. And yet I have to reframe that sometimes of like, I just connected with 2,000 people today by sharing that little video about whatever. And so that's one of the bookends. The other bookend is if we don't get so creative and so unique and come up with our shtick or our thing that is going to set us apart and make us so memorable, then we're not making an impact either. And I would just say, you know what? Really, on the outside, people look at me, I look like a middle-aged white lady that lives in Utah. I don't look like I have a diverse experience. I do. If you sit and talk with me, I have a unique contribution, but so does everyone in your audience. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we think we know just by that 30-second reels what someone is about. And the reality is we're all complex and we all have a unique perspective. And that's why I don't write fiction books. I write nonfiction because to me, the coolest stories are the people standing behind me in line at Target that don't have an Instagram account. They don't have a YouTube channel. They don't own a business. They're just taking care of their aging parent, or they've checked on their neighbor who just went through a loss, or they're the ones who pull in the garbage can for the neighbor on the corner that they know is dealing with some health issues, right? To me, those are the game changers. Those are the voices in the world that are having impact. And so as much as I'm so grateful that we have platforms like this where we get to have impact in a different way, we can get frozen and paralyzed when all of a sudden we're in comparisons. And that's where I think the stewardship principle is so helpful because it's all stewardship. And
let's break that down because stewardship, I think that's maybe a term that people aren't as familiar with.
Right.
So as we're talking about this stewardship principle, tell us what that means and how we break that down into improving our lives and and lives of others? What does it mean to you? And what is the breakdown of that description?
So it's a really simple principle and it's super complex. So it's literally everything in your life. So it's the microphones we're talking into, our computers, our dogs that need to go for a walk to the groomer, to the vet, our kids, our infertility, our marriage, our divorce, our cancer diagnosis, and running a marathon. So it's literally everything. So it's the business you have and the job you lost. It's the good stuff and the hard stuff. And this principle was introduced to me over 10 years ago. And I wrestled with it, especially at the time I was dealing with some parenting issues that were hard. And it really changed how I saw as a parent my role in my kid's life. So often the opposite of being a steward is an owner. And an ownership, and especially in corporate settings, taking ownership is kind of a buzzword right now. And everyone's like, take ownership of your life, of your business, of your health, of your marriage, being a steward doesn't mean you're like not intentional or not trying. But to me, ownership is a very stagnant way to look at the world. For example, if I'm in ownership with my kid, then the choices, the grades, the behavior of my child tends to feel like something I own. And as a parent, we know what that's like to feel frustrated when your kid comes home and they didn't turn in their homework, or they acted out at school, or they're dealing with depression, or maybe even more serious, they're dealing with some addiction that is like life-threatening, right? That ownership mentality of, if I'm a better parent, then my kid will make a better choice, is very limited. When I see my child as a steward, and as a parent, I'm intentionally trying to be a steward in their lives, then their behavior isn't something about me. Their behavior is of a stewardship in my life that I can have influence on and support of. That's one example. If someone's a parent, I can explain stewardship really fast.
Yes. Yeah. That's easy to understand. And also very freeing, where you think,
right.
I think when we try to get in control of, well, why didn't you turn that assignment in? Or why do you have D's and F's? I had this conversation this week.
Yeah.
We're almost at we just had midterm, but I'm literally like role playing this out in my head and seeing relationships and conversations talking. But I love that concept of, I'm here to help guide and direct, but I don't own your behavior. You know, that's something that I can't control. And once you step back into that, and I feel like that even happens when you have small kids too, when you have like preschoolers and you try to control or to hold on to what they're wearing or what they're saying or how they're behaving. And it can get so frustrating. And then you have kid 2, 3, 4, and you're like, oh yeah, they'll just do that. They'll grow out of it. Like the perspective just changes.
It does. And I will say, I had too many arguments for 3rd grade homework, as if that was going to affect Harvard or prison. Like that in my mind, that outcome was so impactful for their future, of their success of their life. And now that I have adult children, I have a 19-year-old and a 25-year-old. If you can practice this principle when your kids are 3, and then keep practicing it through 10 and 15 and 16 and 25, it keeps the relationship about connection and not control. When it comes to business, I think this principle is so empowering, because recently I had a show that I loved, that I did for 4 years, that had 1 million downloads, that had awards. It was having great impact. There were some layoffs from our sponsor, and we lost our film crew. And all of a sudden, in shock, it was canceled after 4 seasons. And so I've had a summer of being an empty nester, and my show was canceled. So stewardship is also very helpful when it comes to business, because if you start to pour yourself into your business, which as business owners we do, it's easy to go into outcome thinking, just like we do with our kids. And it's also easy to go into identity, just like we do with our kids, where all of a sudden our business is who we are. Right. Yep. And so I've really had to practice the principle of stewardship. Now, listen, I've grieved the loss of my stewardship. I was very clear that my weekly show was a stewardship. It wasn't who I was, and it wasn't something I owned, but it was a stewardship that was having an impact in the world. So I've given myself this summer to grieve the change in that stewardship. The reason I say that is, just because you learn this principle doesn't mean you don't slip into ownership. The way I wrote the book is I tried to take some like well-known common stewardships and break the chapters down into that. So it was doable to read. It's 68 pages. It's not overwhelming. It's for men, women, teenagers. And the reason I did is I tried to share the most basic stewardships that kind of affect all of us, our health, our relationships, our education, our profession, our parenting, and give it to the reader in a way that if they'd never heard of it, they would understand it. And for those that had heard me talk about it and wanted to take me to lunch and have me explain it more, it would give them even more of the meat so they could apply it. And so the chapters are written so that the end of each chapter has the stewardship voice and the ownership voice. And the reason I wrote it that way is because even though I've known this principle for over 10 years, I slip into ownership all day long. Mm-hmm. So I've just gotten good at training. Oh, that voice or that feeling, that's me in ownership. I can choose back into stewardship. And when I do that, it expands. It gives me hope. It gives me options. When I'm in ownership, I'm in comparisons. I feel stopped. I feel stuck. I don't feel hope. I feel frustration. And whether that's a relationship, your health, or your business, that's all day long. I am choosing into stewardship. And when we do that, I would just say, especially this last few months as I've gone through this grieving, some stewardships are fun. I mean, like when we post about going to Hawaii, everyone's liking it because it's a fun stewardship. But our family's gone through unemployment where we weren't going on vacations for years, right? So if I'm not careful, that unemployment compared to my neighbor's trip to Hawaii, do you see right there? Mm-hmm. Why is God rewarding my neighbor with their third trip this year to Hawaii? And we can't even go to the dollar movie this week, right? Yeah. So when you look at it as stewardship, it's not that for me and my faith practice that God loves my neighbor more and I'm being punished. It's that for me, God is trusting me with this unemployment. What am I going to do with this season of my life? How am I going to learn from it and add to it? I watched my children go through these unemployments with us. And looking back, we've now had conversations that they're adults. They didn't see the lack. Now, that was probably because my husband and I were hustling in the background, trying to make sure they had school clothes and got to the dentist and put tires on the car. And right, they weren't having those adult worries. But in their minds, it was dad was home more for a while. Yeah. You know, and it changed how they saw what they were going to do in the future. You know, I have kids that are really grateful and willing to be okay not having some stuff. And I don't know how else they got there other than I think part of it was that they lived through some unemployment with us, you know? Yeah. So would I trade a trip to Hawaii for that lesson for my kids? You know, we've now since been able to go to Hawaii. And when we went together as a family, it was like, we are the last people to maybe show up here. Everybody else has already been here 100 times, but it felt very sacred to be there with them because we knew what the last 10 years had been like. So I that's just one example. I don't want to take away from the really hard stewardships that are painful. I can tell you I've lived through a lot of them. I mean, my list of difficult stewardships include infertility and job loss and chronic illness and suicide death and my parents' divorce and right. Mm-hmm. But I've also learned through the gifts of I have 2 great kids and I'm grateful for my marriage that I fought for. And I'm grateful that I am able to be an author and a speaker for this season of my life. So all of us are living the fruit salad, the good stuff and the hard stuff. You know, and I don't know about you. I don't like watermelon in my fruit salad, but some people really love it. And so sometimes we judge each other's stewardships from the outside. Like they have the new car, they have the new house, they have all the followers on social media. And over here, I'm living through this, and this. And it's so easy to fill in comparisons and get stuck in the story. When you can see your life through the life of a steward, it creates a hope and it gives you inspiration to how to pivot, to be resilient, to try to learn from that experience and ask for the support you need to get through it.
What are some first action steps for someone who's listening right now? And maybe they're feeling like they are maybe stuck in a comparison or maybe having that ownership and feeling resentment or feeling burdened, where they're just like, I don't even know what to do. What are some good first steps that someone listening could take? I mean, aside from reading your book, which we will link to, absolutely. But what are some things that we could do right now if we're stuck in a spot like that?
Well, I can tell you this, my ownership voice gets really loud when I isolate. When my story is only my voice and I'm not checking in with the trusted women and men in my life that can call me out on stuff, then that voice, that narrative, that story gets so loud that it's all I can see. So the first thing I would say is check if you're isolating. Is there a way in which you can reach out and create some connection today with a trusted voice in your life? The reality is this, whatever you're going through that feels overwhelming and tragic, I promise you one day you're going to be the person someone reaches out to. Mm-hmm. I promise that. One of my favorite stories the first time I heard it was on one of my favorite shows that I've binge watched like 30 times every season, and it's West Wing. It's an old show, but it's that and Gilmore Girls. I am constantly watching those two shows.
Yes, I love Gilmore Girls.
So if you have any audience members that are West Wing fans, so Leo McGarry has come from addiction, and he's talking to his friend Josh, who's gone through some PTSD. And he tells him this story, and this is the story I love to share. He said there was this guy one day walking along, and he fell in a pit, and he was yelling out, "Help, help, help." And all of a sudden his rabbi walked by and heard him yelling help and threw a scripture into the pit and kept walking. He kept yelling, "Help, help, help." And all of a sudden his doctor walked by and threw a prescription into the pit and then kept walking. So this guy's still yelling, "Help, help, help." All of a sudden his friend walks by. It makes me emotional when I tell the story. His friend jumped in the pit with him, and the guy said, "Oh no, now we're both stuck in the pit. Why'd you jump in?" And the friend said, "Well, yeah, but I've been in this pit before and I know the way out." I mean, the reality is we're sick from our isolation, and I can go there. And so I'm so grateful for the friends in my life, my faith friends that have wrestled with some heavy stewardships. The last few months, I've been very intentional of watching my own isolation. I didn't have a kid I had to get up and make breakfast for. It would have been really easy to just stay in bed. I mean, my dog would have gotten annoyed, but my husband leaves early in the morning for work and comes home, and I work mainly from home. And there was a lot of gap on my calendar this summer. And so I was pretty clear on the hours going by of who do I need to reach out to and text. Now, listen, if you're in a stuck spot, you're going to think no one wants to hear your story. Everyone's busy. You're a burden. Those are some of the things that I want you to be aware of. That voice is the lie. And the reality is, okay, yeah, maybe your BFF is busy and going through a hard time, but pray and think of another name. I like to have a list of like my 5 SOS friends, because the first 3 I probably I'll talk myself out of reaching to, so you have 5 on that list, hopefully, so that you can go through the list and someone's available. The next thing I'm going to say is therapy is paying for those SOS friends. Like, that's the reality of hiring a coach, or hiring a therapist. There's someone on the calendar that you pay that their job is literally to give you feedback and check the story in your head. And then I would say, I guess my last takeaway tool that's a super helpful one is your no's are just as powerful as your yeses. Mm-hmm. And whatever we say yes to, we're automatically saying no to some things. Check how many things you've been saying yes to. If you're hitting burnout, which you specifically mentioned burnout, so this is one of my favorite giveaways on burnout, is start giving yourself permission to say no to something today and just see what happens. See if your shoulders relax. Go to your calendar and see, is there something you can cancel and reschedule and move, kick down the street a little, right? Sometimes we want to say yes to everything because we want those opportunities and we want to have those conversations and we want to keep expansion. But if we're always about yes, we're saying no usually to our mental health, our physical health, connections with people we love. And so this summer, as much as some of my no's were forced on me, I intentionally said no to some things because I knew this was a transition summer for me. And I needed to be really clear that I wasn't saying yes from pain. I needed to say yes from clarity, from healing, from intention. And I knew because I was traumatized and in grief that if I said yes to anything over the summer, it would be coming from a different place, a hustle, some shame and some grief. And so I literally told some people in my life as an accountability, I will not be saying yes to anything until fall because I know me and I know I need to process some of this, and it would be too easy to numb it all right now with being busy. So those would be the two things: find connection in the smallest ways or professionally, and then give yourself permission to say no so that there's some space and gap. That's the creation cycle. We rest every night so that we can get up the next day. That's what nature does so beautifully. As humans, we try to just keep working all night. Yeah. Right. I'm watching right now to the seasons of the geese flying south. And I think nature can teach us so much about diversity, about imperfection, about seasons, and about rest. And I don't love winter, but I've tried the last few years to kind of lean into, like, some cultures are really good at slowing down during the winter. Some other cultures are not. Like, we're a 24/7. There's always internet. There's always, a light we can turn on now. So I hope that's helpful. It is. Those are some of my top two tools, is that I need sometimes to check the voice in my head. And I need to have people in my life that love me. And when I forget the song of my heart, they sing the words back to me. But those are also the friends that call me on my stuff. And they'll say, I don't know where that's coming from, but that's not who I see. That's not what I see in you. That's not what you offer the world. That's not the impact I've watched you do. And I trust them because I also trust that they tell me the hard stuff, Yeah.
Yep. Wow. Well, this has been so powerful. I know I've learned a lot listening, and I am sure those who are listening right now are feeling the same way. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Please let our audience know where they can connect with you and learn more from you.
Well, I would love to connect. I love doing podcast interviews because I love hearing from a listener, a week later or 6 months later. I mean, that's the power of a podcast, right? We never know when someone's going to hear it. So you can DM me. I'm on all the platforms. I'm not super active on Twitter. It's a little angry for me out there. So I don't.
You mean X now?
Yes. Yes. X. Yes.
I know. Twitter's a little rough.
It's a little rough, but LinkedIn, Facebook, I have a professional page on Facebook. And so if you can just find my name, it's the only reason why it's cool to have a weird name, because Google knows who you're trying to find. But my website, Ganel-Lyn.com, no hyphen, no capital, has all the links to my social platforms and my YouTube channel. And I think maybe your audience is probably the most on Instagram. And so I'm there, and usually it's easy to find because you just start typing GAN and all of a sudden it comes up because it's just a unique name. But I would love to hear from people there. And, but wherever you feel comfortable with, there's ways to reach out even on my website. So if you're not into socials and you just want to email and do a speaking request, there's a link on my website for that.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Camille.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you found this helpful, please share. That is one of the things that means the very most, is when you have listened to something that is impactful to you and may help many others. You have the power and the voice to do that. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Spotify, please give us those 5 stars. It means so much that you spend this time here with me. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see you next week. Hey CEOs, thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please let me know in a comment and a 5-star review. You could have the chance of being a featured review on an upcoming episode. Continue the conversation on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast. And remember, you are the boss.